like a Hellcat.
Hey guys, what is up? So, we are gonna be doing the thing that replaced my dog horror story. Now, this is the, I believe, Darkness Prevails, right? Is that him? Yeah, Darkness Prevails is the one who does this. So, the link to this specific video will be in the description down below. So, um, when we are doing uh, the video, I am going to mute my mic so it's so I don't, if I'm talking, you guys can actually watch the video, and if I'm talking, obviously you won't be able to hear me. My talking isn't going to be anything uh interesting. So anyways, let's get into it, and I'll see you guys after, like, well, you guys can see me. I'll see I'll talk to you guys after the video. So let's get into it.
Growing up, my family was extremely poor. We lived in the south, in the middle of the countryside. It was land mostly owned by my mom's parents. They allowed my dad to do with the land as he pleased, which amounted to him hunting and farming on the land. This was basically a necessity. We were so poor that even though my dad had a full-time job, he'd have to come home and farm and hunt to feed us. He grew tomatoes, cucumbers, and zucchini and other things, and would bring back deer meat and squirrel meat most of the time from his hunts. Even though I was a kid, I knew I couldn't be picky. My most notable memories of dinners we had included fried tomatoes and zucchini, as well as deer steak and squirrel dumplings. I loved it. Then again, I didn't try much else for a long time. It was just whatever we could grow and eat, with an extremely rare outing into town. But food from town tasted weird to me. Anyway, when Dad did come home and did have free time, he was tired, exhausted. And with him and Mom always busy or just tired, they didn't really have time to supervise me. When I was 4, they were beginning to realize that I needed to be able to play outside, but they couldn't supervise me constantly. Dad knew the troubles about that land. There were coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions, even bears. He'd seen them for himself. So they discussed a solution to this problem together. They ended up finding me and adopting me a puppy. The puppy was so playful and perky, with tons of energy and love to give. She had blue eyes too. That was curious for me. I'd seen dogs before, and I'd never seen one with eyes like that. So blue, they were like the blue of a flame. Mom decided to name her Sapphire. She had to explain to me what a sapphire even was first. We ended up calling her Saffy most of the time. Saffy and I grew up together. She grew into a big, pretty dog. We never did figure out her breed, though, but I'll try to describe her looks. She looked like a mix between a German and Australian Shepherd. Her ears were narrow and pointed, and her coat was light gray with splashes of black thrown in. Her snout was long and angular, and she was quite tall. My dad was 6 foot in his prime, and she came up to his waist on all fours. She was just as loyal and protective my parents had hoped she would be. She would join my dad on hunts sometimes. She got pretty darn good at running deer across his hunting trail. Plus, she scared the crap out of the local coyote population. My dad says for as long as she was full grown, he didn't see hide nor hair of coyotes or bobcats anymore. Plus, she was my best friend. Safi loved to play fetch. I had this old plastic frisbee that I got in some sort of goodie bag when I visited some church one Easter. We never went back, but it was worth it, because that lime green frisbee, that was Safi's favorite toy. Safi slept in the house at night. She may have been big and sturdy, but no member of the family was just going to be left outside every night. So she would usually sleep in a little pile of pillows in my bedroom, or she would sleep on this handmade chest my mom had. It sat under the living room window and gave Safi a good look outside when she wanted it. When I turned 10 years old, something happened that changed my family forever. Late one night, Safi began to bark. Now, our Safi knew better than to wake up the whole house to a storm of barking in the middle of the night. This was something she hadn't done for years because we trained her out of it. She hadn't done something like that since she was a very small puppy. Mom and Dad somehow slept through this, but that may be because they're heavy sleepers, and I woke up quickly to make her stop. You see, I didn't want poor Safi to get in trouble, so I went to investigate myself. I got her to calm down real quick. Her barking turned into low whimpers instead. She seemed desperate to get to something outside. She was staring out the window, glancing back at me every few seconds. It was as if she was trying to get me to see it too. I peered out the window and scanned left and right and up and down, but I didn't see a thing. Nothing out of the ordinary and no movement. I was a 10-year-old child, though, and I had completely convinced myself that Safi and I should go outside and investigate this together. She'd always stuck by my side before. She didn't like to stray too far from you when you walked outside. I threw on a big warm jacket and my dad's boots that he left by the door. They were way too big for me. I then began to open the door, but as soon as there was enough room, Safi burst outside and ran off into the woods, still whimpering instead of barking all the way, until I could not hear her anymore. I ran after her, calling her name over and over again. I couldn't catch up to her, and I soon realized that I had no idea what direction she could have gone in those woods. I searched all over the forest, following our trails, trying to find a trace of her until sunrise. By the time my parents were up, they found my bedroom without their son in it, so they opened the door to look for me. But there I was, crying on the porch. I let them know what happened, told them that I was the reason Safi had run away. Dad placed his hand on my shoulder, trying to comfort me as best he could. He told me we'd go look for her together in the truck, and we did just that. Dad called in sick first, even though honestly he couldn't afford a sick day like that. Mom stayed at the house in case she came back. Me and Dad drove around, driving real slow through the trails in those woods, calling out her name. We parked in several spots, walking through the woods and calling out for her, searching for Safi up and down and all over. After a long and unsuccessful day, we had to call it quits for the time being. But Dad was sure to remind me that Safi was a good girl. She was probably just lost, he said. He told me them dogs got a knack for finding their way back home. And I believed him. I'd always seen my parents as people who were smarter than me. Sure enough, Dad was right. The following day, right before sundown, we saw Safi walking right out of those woods. Immediately, I was worried she was hurt. She wasn't panting like you'd expect a tired and hungry dog to be doing, but she was walking real slow and a bit awkward. She was walking like she saw us as strangers all of a sudden, but she knew that she had to approach us anyway. I was kind of cautious about getting up close to her at first. It was the strangest feeling. When I did get close, I couldn't help but hug her and pet her like crazy. Immediately, I noticed something else that was odd. Safi was perfectly clean. This dog had been lost in the woods for 2 days. She didn't look a bit dirty, let alone hungry or thirsty. My parents were happy to see her back at first, too, but even that wouldn't last long. Whatever came back from those woods, I don't think it was the same Safi. I used to feed Safi myself every morning. It was my chore, even though it never felt like one. We fed her this canned dog food that she was crazy about. Plus, we were never allowed to feed her table scraps. We wanted to keep her happy and healthy. But when we tried to feed her after her return, she would not take the food. She seemed insanely uninterested with it. She wouldn't drink out of her water bowl either. So we tried to force some food on her tongue to remind her of the taste and to stoke her appetite. But she ended up biting my dad. She even drew blood. My dad was definitely the most taken off guard about it. He wasn't mad, though. He apologized to the girl and pet her before going to bandage up his finger. It was decided then that she would eat when she was ready. Worst comes to worst, we'd have to find some money to take her to the vet if she got sick. A week passed by. We hadn't seen her eat or drink yet. In fact, her water bowl had not been refilled at all. There was the same amount of water in there as the first day she came back. She hadn't touched it. Despite this, Safi stayed the same shape, the same weight. Dad had convinced himself that something more ordinary was going on. He claimed that when she was lost in the woods, she discovered her joy of hunting. It is only natural for a dog. So now she enjoyed meals outdoors whenever she was outside. We didn't see her eat or drink because maybe she enjoyed finding that stuff for herself. But I didn't quite believe that. I went with it, but I didn't agree. I'd missed her so much and I'd blamed myself so deeply for nearly losing her. I just wanted things to be normal. But they only got worse. Safi stopped sleeping in my room when she came back. She would do her sleeping in the living room from there on, apparently. But one night, I woke up and
Okay. I am gonna go and do something real quick. I'll be right back, and it'll be pretty much edit, so it's like you didn't miss a thing, and I wasn't gone for long. In fact, I wasn't gone at all. But yeah, so we'll be right back after this commercial. No, I'm just kidding. We'll be right back. Alrighty, we're back now. Let's continue the video. I'm gonna mute my mic and then we'll be watching the video again. So, here we go.
I found that Safi was on top of me. I was about to smile and pet her until I really saw what was going on. Safi was on top of me crouching, and her teeth were fully bared inches from my face. She wasn't growling or snarling though, nothing like that. What she was doing was sort of vibrating, rapidly shaking back and forth unnaturally. There was a sound coming from her mouth too. Christ, just remembering that sound gives me chills. It was like an old woman who'd been smoking her whole life, screaming desperately for help from the middle of some deep cave. It was all one long breath of a sound. No interruptions, no stops, just one long, awful, horrifying noise coming from that dog. I kid you not, this went on for about 2 minutes straight. Then my mom groggily opened the door to my bedroom the rest of the way, as it was a bit ajar. She wanted to know what that noise was. Instantly, Safi stopped making that noise. She stopped shaking too, then jumped down off my bed and walked that slow, awkward walk back to the living room. I explained to my parents that I did not feel safe with Safi anymore, that she wasn't the same dog. When I admitted this, I knew that they agreed with me, but they didn't say it. I don't think they wanted to believe it. They didn't want to admit that the dog we'd raised and put so much love and time and money into was broken, was all wrong. From then on, I locked my bedroom door at night. I even began avoiding Safi throughout the day. Eventually, something happened that broke me right out of my denial. It was then that it became clear to me that this was not the same animal that I'd loved before. She didn't even like to play with her frisbee. I remember trying to throw that frisbee with her, and she wouldn't even look at it. She would just stare at me. That was really heartbreaking. Anyway, one day, Safi had been in and out of the house all day, doing God knows what, while Dad was out hunting once again. As for me, I was minding my own business. I was pretty bored, so I decided to go for a walk on the trails in the woods. But I didn't expect to run into Safi. I did. I saw her there in the woods, but she didn't see me for a while. She had somehow managed to get herself halfway up a tree. I didn't know dogs could climb trees like that. She was lying down with ease on a thin tree branch. I didn't call out to her. I mean, I used to be excited when I saw Safi, but nowadays when I saw her, I'd rather just turn and walk away. But then I saw her mouth. It was wide open, but completely motionless. Her mouth was covered in red. It appeared to be blood. And then I really saw the branches around her. They were covered in carcasses, dead birds, dead squirrels, a couple of dead snakes too. Apparently none of them had been eaten either. They'd simply been killed and strewn about on the tree. It was like the tree was decorated with animal corpses. Seeing this, I was stunned and disturbed. And then I looked at Safi again. She still hadn't moved, and she appeared to not be breathing at all. She was lying there, her head up, mouth still wide open. It was similar to how she was lying on my bed that night. But this time, her mouth was so open, so damn wide, it looked as if she was about to tear the skin and bones from her own face. She didn't budge at all either. No sound was coming out of her. I couldn't look away from this. I watched her for several minutes, trying to control my breathing because I did not want her to hear me. I waited for her to move, waited for her to take a big breath or yawn or get her attention taken by something moving in the woods, but it never happened. For the entirety of those several disturbing minutes, she remained in this state. Then, my mom called me from the house behind me in the distance. I turned only for a moment, awakened from my stupor. When I turned back towards Safi, she was no longer in the tree. I found her on the ground right in front of me, staring up at me. I was so badly startled that I fell backward onto the ground. She looked at me for a moment, then walked away in the opposite direction of the house. It was then that I realized that her eyes had changed too. They weren't that sapphire blue that we'd fallen in love with. I realized that they had been fading every day since she came back. They were now a sort of blue-gray. That was the last I ever saw Safi, because after that, she never came back. Or should I say that the thing that looked like Safi never came back. This time with Safi being gone, my family didn't talk about it, didn't worry about it. We basically pretended that Safi had never come back the first time. I wasn't able to mourn for a long time either. I was too bewildered. scared, confused. Eventually, I would cry for my dog, for the real Safi that I knew way back then, but it took me years. Years of convincing myself that those couple of weeks that Safi had come back, they were just a dream, a nightmare of sorts. But it can't be. You see, I talked to my dad about this whole thing recently. It's been 18 years. I'm 28 now, and I visited my dad recently to go hunting with him, which we do often nowadays. I asked him, "Dad, do you remember Safi a long time ago? Remember when she came back home from being lost in the woods?" He looked down at the ground. We were sitting in the forest, moments away from heading back home after an unsuccessful hunt. He sort of fidgeted with the rocks on the ground a bit before answering me. Then he replied, "Well, about that, there's something I've been meaning to tell you and your mom. I just don't know how to say it. I wanted to talk about it before, when you moved out, but I couldn't. You see, son, I would see Safi in the woods for the next couple of years from time to time. She'd be staring at me from the distance, never coming too close, and I would never call out to her. She kinda creeped me out, to be honest. But the thing is, around that same time, I found a couple of trees, all messed up in the same way." I interrupted for a moment. "What do you mean, messed up?" He explained. "Well, a couple of times when I went hunting, I stumbled upon these trees. Trees covered with dead animals and such. Like someone had killed them and just tossed them there. Left them in one piece. You'd think they'd be eaten by something if they were left dead like that in the woods. But they weren't. They were just thrown on a bunch of tree branches, like some sort of bloody Christmas tree or something." My breath caught in my throat for a moment. My dad was sitting here telling me that he saw the exact same thing that I did. Telling me that this tree corpse thing had happened multiple times, and that Safi thing was still out there. He went on, "That's not even the only thing from that time. Once Safi got gone again, I started hearing weird noises on the hunts. I'm used to the animal calls out there, but this call I kept hearing was unlike anything I'd heard before. If I could compare it to something, it was like a metal cat yowling really loud from within a deep valley, all echoey and metallic and scratchy." After talking with my dad, I now know how real everything was. I can't just chalk it up to a dream now. It may have been a long time ago, but I know it all to be true. Whatever happened to my Safi, the real Sapphire, my best friend in the world, I just hope her last moments were peaceful and that she rests in peace now. I miss you, girl.
Well, that was um very, very, how do I say this? Unsettled in the least. Those that thing that was pretending to be that dog. It is much more different than they think. They may think that it's just a weird um, coincidence. Well, I shouldn't say coincidence. Uh, just weird. And then there are a few animals from Native American folklore that can do what that dog did, replacing it. There are the skinwalkers for in the first thing. Um, except for they don't have any tails when they're in the animal form, or so I've been told. Um, and there's the Uruguru that can sort of do the same thing, but I've never heard something like that before. That is, that's very interesting. Very weird, to say the least. Um, I'm not entirely sure how that exactly works. Um, but however it works, it is very odd. I should probably move that mirror because you can see the um, thing. Anyways, whatever. So that is a very weird thing, to say the least. I guess. Um, I don't know why I'm looking over here. That is where my recording thing. Anyways, so I don't know. I've never exactly thought this much about that. Oh well. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like. Uh, wait, what? I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. Okay. If you liked this video, I can't even remember my outro. What the hell? Okay, I think I got it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to click that notification bell so you never miss another upload I do. Peace. There we go. That's how you do it.
I know what you fantasize about.